the key to any business is filling a need. And right now it's fish tanks, but tomorrow it could be something totally different.
Welcome back to an ORIUNDI interview. And today I am here with Ryan Kumpf from Blue Thumb Chicago. Blue Thumb Chicago is a company that specializes in servicing and supplying saltwater aquariums around the Chicagoland area. How are you today, Ryan?
I'm well. Fish tanks is the short word for that description. I do fish tanks.
Correct.
All sorts, but specifically saltwater, like Anthony mentioned. So that is where the invertebrates come in. There's the live coral, but there's all these other parts of the ocean that also go in a saltwater reef tank.
Yeah, it's as you can see behind us, we have one of the tanks that he supplies and services and does a wonderful job on.
And so that was 2008 when I started the business, and it's still going really well. A lot of it is service focused. Most of these tanks are serviced every 4 weeks, I would say. But we try to provide the entire package. So sourcing fish, corals, obviously there's all these invertebrates, the shrimp, the sea stars, urchins, anemones, but we also provide the food and do the cleaning of the fish tank as well. So it's a fairly demanding sort of thing, and I think it makes sense to have a professional do this sort of gig.
Anyways, Ryan, just wanted to get a little bit of a background about you, where you grew up, just a little bit of your childhood, your history,
Sure.
And how you got where you are right now in front of a fish tank.
Sure. So I grew up in Mount Prospect, which is just outside of Chicago, by the O'Hare Airport there. And how I got here, I guess, is a love of science to begin with, but I was also interested in fish, and I would say the ocean from a very young age. I think that National Geographic played a big part of that. The way that cameras evolved through my youth was a pretty incredible thing to witness. Blue Planet was a special that came out, but I remember watching a lot of National Geographic and being mesmerized with the ocean. I think that it's got a mystery about it that is kind of unmatched elsewhere. And it just always fascinated me. And so I really wanted to put my efforts into protecting the environment, potentially working with these animals. And so that led me to Fisheries and Wildlife Management at Michigan State. And then I was left to try and figure out a job that was related to that. And I ended up working seasonal jobs out in the field for a college initially, but then I moved back to Chicago and found an aquarium company. And really, I didn't have an aquarium growing up. I might have had a goldfish, but it's not like I had aquariums my whole childhood. That's not how this went. It was almost more of a business for me in the beginning. I did work for someone else, but I decided to go my own route, and I love what I do. I think that's an important piece of the puzzle here is I tried to follow fish, and now I get to work with fish. And Mother Nature on a daily basis, and I love that part, especially being able to bring it to people's homes like this. The part I really enjoy is the biological element. There's a lot of pests that come in from the ocean, and a lot of these pests can really start to wreak havoc on a fish tank if they're unchecked by a predator. They just keep multiplying and become basically an infestation. And it really doesn't matter what kind of filtration you have. If you have a biological issue like that, you almost have to find some sort of biological control, which means finding a predator to eat that species.
Was there any sort of push in your childhood to go in this direction, or is it just something you chose to do and you just went for it?
No sort of push. I think that my parents appreciated my love of science. But to steer me this direction, honestly, I think it was more of being supportive and being
Nice.
like, hey, this guy really, cares about the environment and living things. And they were supportive of that. They didn't say, this doesn't seem like a job that would make a lot of money. There was never any of that. They were supportive of my ventures in science. And it sort of kind of went this other direction of starting a business and being an entrepreneur. But at the root, I think it is the love of science and bringing that, and it is so much reflected in the work. Mother Nature is the judge in some ways. If you get it wrong, it doesn't work, right? So I like that aspect of working with animals, and the proof is in the pudding of what you're doing and things surviving, for sure.
Yeah, and that said, going back to your background and the support of your parents, can you tell me a little bit about your background? I know your mother's Italian,
Yes.
and generally very strong characters, strong
Yes.
mothers, but very supportive. So
Yeah.
I just was curious to hear a little bit about your connection with your heritage, connection with Italy, and a little bit about your Italian side of the family.
Yeah, like you said, my mother is the Italian side of the family. She was incredibly supportive of everything that I did. I remember, trying to follow music initially, and she was supportive of that too, even though we all know that can be a tough struggle. But I think my mom and her Italian heritage show a lot of strength and compassion. When I think of Italian people, I do tend to think of passion. I also tend to think of hardworking. But there, are so many aspects of Italian heritage that I like. I think Italy makes it very easy to like. I mean, whether it's the cuisine, the art, music, I even think there is a science and engineering part that's reflected in the cars that they make. I tend to think of Italians as well-rounded people. There's probably things that we do really well, but I think that we play the field really well, whether that's athletics, a lot of different things. And so I also was passionate about soccer. I played soccer my whole life, all through high school, and I always thought that was the Italian side. Yeah. It could have been the Irish
That's where
side.
the genetic skill came from.
Yeah, so I
Right
think
through.
there are a lot of things to like about Italy. It makes it easy to love, whether it is the cuisine or that. But I think of them as passionate people that pour their heart and soul into what they do. And I feel that that's what I do here, is I followed my heart and I put all my efforts and brain power into this profession. It is a pretty niche one, but I feel like it does fit me really well. And, I love that part. And there's parts of my Italian heritage that did have to do with like fishing or even like peddling fruit. It's hard to know how that relates, but I feel a sort of connection to that sort of aspect of the Italian culture as well. So.
Yeah, getting your hands dirty.
Yeah, no, I do like that.
Years ago.
I do like that part. Working outside. Obviously, this isn't outside, but you're still, getting your hands dirty. Yeah. More hands-on sort of work for sure.
And then that said, growing up in the Chicago area, obviously a huge Italian influence in the city and the suburbs. What are some things that you saw growing up, or things that you still see being in the area, that represent the heritage or that show this deep tie to Italian American heritage? Sure.
I mean, Melrose comes to mind, and their festival that they would have every year. We would always go to that. Mostly for the food. I don't know why else you go to that festival. But that's definitely the first thing that comes to mind. The cooking it definitely strikes a chord. My grandparents, whether it was rolling gnocchi on the bed and that kind of stuff, there was a lot of home-cooked meals. And then my mom kind of carried on that tradition with, they would never call it sauce. It was gravy. And, we had all that frozen in the freezer. And so that part, I definitely... That's the nostalgia, I think, for me in Chicago, and is the food. I mean, there's all these Italian restaurants for sure, but I think that Italians make up a big part of Chicago, and again, it makes me think of the hardworking element. I mean, a lot of my relatives, it was not glamorous jobs. They were either working in mines or they left Italy because it was poor and they needed opportunity, and so it's not like we came from this long line of, aristocrats. It was not like that at all. In fact, my mom was the first one in her family to go to college. So that was a big deal. And I remember she told me that they took a life insurance policy for her as a child. And then when she was 18, that's what she got to go towards college, which I thought was a very interesting thing. I think the other interesting part about my parents' family is she has 5 siblings, and her father really did a lot of odd jobs. I mean, he never really had a steady paycheck the way that some professionals do. He worked on houses and kind of did contracting work, but he also did stuff at the flea market. So he was a man of many methods to make money, but he successfully was able to raise 5 kids. And so that's pretty amazing, and a good success story there for sure.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of Italian American stories with, you know, the mom or the dad trying to make ends meet, the big family, you know, 5, 6 siblings, very Italian, Catholic, all those years ago. A lot of, you know, obviously we see today it's more 1, 2, 3 kids in a family. Back then you have a lot of aunts, uncles, great aunts, great uncles, these huge families. You have one family with 8 siblings marrying, you know, into the other family is like 10 siblings, and you just have family everywhere.
That touches on another Italian part, is that the love of family and how important that is. That's definitely another thing that I think I grab from them. Not that other nationalities are not like that, but an importance in family is a huge value of mine, and I think that's largely an Italian trait, but again, that comes from a lot of different heritage. But yeah, I think that sort of sticking together, you know, not just your immediate family, but Italians, right? Yeah. Sticking together. I think that was a big part of how my grandfather was successful in all those odd jobs, is he has a network of other Italians that they would work together and have each other's back, and that was how it worked. And I think that there's a lesson there, right? I mean, we can't do this stuff alone. Family is important, and that may mean, you know, just Italian family, sort of not directly related.
Would you say family is the main takeaway that you take of the Italian culture in general?
I was kind of thinking about that. I think that the Italian passion definitely comes to mind as a forefront. Not that other nationalities aren't passionate, but there's something there. And then absolutely the focus on how important family is and sticking with them no matter what. You know, that's a lifelong lesson that is really easier said than done. You know, I think it's easy to be positive when things are good, but when things go bad, that sticking together is key. Right. So yeah, I think that's a big takeaway of that Italian heritage, and then just kind of being well-rounded. I still think that Italians do a lot of different things well, which is a great thing.
After talking about a lot of Italian values and just general values from the Italian passion and family, how do you apply a lot of those values from the Italian heritage, but also just from your childhood and who you are as a person into your business?
Sure, I think that there are a lot of values that we can take away from heritage. I think that being honest and even being professional, that sort of thing does well in business. And you know, whether that's all from my Italian heritage or not, I don't know, but I think that it's important to hang on to those values, right? I mean, if we don't, they kind of disappear. And so I really love the Italian heritage, and it's something that I probably don't see reflected in my working life all the time, but it's definitely close to the heart, and I think it allows me to relate to people in some ways. You're hitting it on the head, is the values that were instilled from your family are reflected in your everyday, you know, life, whether it's working hard or just being sincere and honest.
Yeah, that's one of the things I love bringing out of myself or even out of other people, is sometimes you do a lot of things day to day, week to week, and you don't necessarily always know the why. And then a lot of times the way you act or the way you think of things or the passions that you have, you sometimes forget that a lot of that actually comes from your heritage, how you grew up, where you grew up, because that's also very important. And so it's always interesting to sometimes see the answers that people have to that type of question, because it is really hard sometimes to place why you do things the way that you do. And it's almost like an obsession that I've had of trying to figure out, because we're all creatures of habit, we're humans, and a lot of it is from things that happen over and over and over in our childhood. So it's just a very interesting concept, and culturally it generally relates. So when you talk about some of the values in the Italian community, whether it's passion, whether it's family, and then how you live your life today, you're very passionate about your business, you have a family, you're very close to your family, and those maybe you can attribute to the heritage, maybe not, maybe it can be something else, but I think there's something said when you're in that environment for so long,
Yeah,
and then you apply it to your
well, and
life.
it could be something as simple as realizing the opportunities our ancestors had, which were maybe not as many, right?
Right.
And humbling yourself and thinking, look at all the opportunities I have here, make the most of that. And that's the other kind of part of life that I think is really key is we have all these freedoms and opportunities to try different things, to start our own business, and that's not to be overlooked. And my Italian ancestors didn't have that opportunity, right? I mean, if they did, it would have been probably impossible, and that's why they were working in mines and doing things like that. I think that sometimes your ancestry can just be humbling. Remembering where you come from is always important to keep you humbled and focused, I think. So to me, that's a big part of it too, is like, look at how far we come. Like on my other side, my grandma was in an orphanage. And so in 1 or 2 generations, a lot can happen, if things go well. And I think that family and parenting is probably a big part of that, but having the opportunities, and sometimes the parents are the ones that give you those opportunities for sure.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, we're also blessed to live in the United States where there's a lot of opportunity and you can completely change your fortunes in 1 or 2 generations versus in other places it may take longer. And that said, what makes you excited or super passionate about being an entrepreneur in general?
Yeah.
What is some of the things that just get you going?
Well, I mean, there's no ceiling, there's no limits. It's at the end of the day, you decide the trajectory of your business, and that could change from one day to another. And I think that is a big part of being a business, is rolling with the punches, adjusting, adapting to the environment, whether that's financially or logistics, and something's not working. That's what I like, is that creative freedom to build your own, not only business model, but vision of what you want to be. And nobody can alter that, right? I mean, it's your vision. And so I love that part. Obviously, I like working with the things that I do, corals and growing things, that's great. But I really think that the freedom of creating your own thing, and then potentially maybe one of my sons can take over or even just work with me temporarily to make money. He doesn't have to take over the business. I think that being a fish person is a pretty specific gig. It might not be for everybody.
Yeah.
And so I try to be open-minded about that aspect. But again, I love what I do. And even at 18 years, I've been in business 18 years, I by no means see it as like I'm done. I have vision of where I want to go in the future. And, that keeps me focused too, is like, what's next? What are the goals? How do we do this better? That kind of thing.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Like you said, the flexibility, no ceiling, and it's really up to you. Everything that you do it starts with you, it ends with you.
Yeah. I think it all the time that Blue Thumb could start out as an aquarium business and turn into, aquaculture of fish. And it really could take a totally different direction in the future depending on the needs around you, right? And that's the key to any business, is filling a need. And right now it's fish tanks, but tomorrow it could be something totally different.
That's wonderful. That's like that's a great quote.
Yeah, I think of that stuff all the time. Yeah.
One last question for you. So for younger entrepreneurs or people that are embarking on a project, specifically those of Italian descent, how do they take those values from our heritage and apply those into their business or into their project moving forward to be successful?
Sure. I think that it's important to remember where you came from. I think that we touched on that a little bit. I think that everybody's values from their heritage are going to be a little different, right? You may have Italian values that are different than mine. We may have some common ones.
Sure.
But I think it's important to hang on to that stuff. Know your roots. In the end, it usually gives you better perspective on yourself of, why am I this way? Why do I do these things? And I would also say that failure is part of the process. It takes a long time to build something good, and it's hard not to get discouraged sometimes. So I would encourage them to follow their heart, but at the same time be ready for a lot of hard work. It just nothing good really ever comes easy. And I also think that sometimes when you're on the right path, you have to push in that direction to make it stand out or make yourself different or present your value in a different way. And I think that that's kind of the irony with part of this job is that I spent a lot of time in school studying biology and fish and animal physiology, but in reality, the manual labor is what gets this kind of stuff done. Yes, there has to be an understanding of what you're trying to achieve and the goal at the end, but I'd be lying if I didn't say there was a lot of heavy lifting and that sometimes it comes down to fixing a leak or figuring out why something doesn't turn on electrically. And so I think there's a lot of aspects of this job, but it also makes me think of all the aspects of a business owner, your customer service, your marketing, your all these things at the same time. So it helps to be well-rounded and understand the different aspects of business. It's not just how well can I do my job, it's how I portray myself as a business, how I choose to advertise, and just the overall quality of the service. I mean, that really comes down to what you do every single day and the efforts you put forward. And I really pride myself on that aspect. We're trying to not just keep fish alive, but be professional, be prompt, timely, responsive, all the things that a good business should be, besides having a good product.
That's excellent advice, and I thank you for that. And the last thing I wanted to add is obviously Ryan and his company are on social media, and I'll make sure to drop all of that in the description. His company does absolutely amazing work and very interesting too. It's one of those businesses or fields that you don't think so much about, but people truly have fish tanks everywhere. Absolutely. Businesses have fish tanks. I always remember as a kid going to the doctor's office, they always had a giant fish tank. Somebody has to service it. Absolutely. So, but that said, thank you, Ryan, for all that you do, and another great example of a business owner of Italian descent doing great things in the community. And thanks for having you.
Thank you.
Thank you, man. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely.